He had his bond hearing today. He looked good. He looked like he was in good spirits. No crazy weight gain or anything like that. He looked good. The judge was on the same vibe she was on last time, which is that, wait, they're saying murder for hire. They're saying you put bounties up. They're saying you ordered the shooters. They're saying the shooters shot. I'm saying that's going to be no bond. There's basically no argument you can make to this judge in a murder for hire case to get a bond. The one silver lining for the defense is that the prosecution's case has taken two major hits. One, the prosecution has had to abandon their allegation that he rapped and celebrated about this murder, that he put these lyrics out talking about, oh yeah, I got you, you out here screaming no, no, crying in the street. Prosecution had to back away from that allegation. It was proven false. They need that allegation, and now they're not going to be able to have it. The other allegation they backed away from, which is huge, it shows the weakening of the case. Previously, the prosecution had alleged that Durk paid the bounty for the death through one of his co-defendants, and they named the co-defendant. Now they've backed off that allegation. They're not actually saying that Durk paid the bounty through the co-defendant or anyone else. And the fact that they're not saying that suggests that previously they thought they were going to be able to prove that he paid the bounty through this guy, and now they know we're not going to be able to prove that he paid the bounty through this guy, and so they took it out. So at the end of the day, there was never a chance of a bond when you saw how the judge kind of ruled after all the argument and what she was saying. But there is a silver lining, which is the case over the last 6 months.
All right, remember we had the whole Lil Durk thing where it was a particular dude that they said bought him a house and he took care of him. They said he was snitching, and I forget the guy's name. Now apparently they got two more guys. And I put them on the screen. They're saying that they pled out and they're going to testify against Lil Durk, and basically said they were, they are saying that they were, murder for hire, and that, they got the bread from him. And, for as articulate as Lil Durk is, honestly, very, very smart. You know what I'm saying? I've heard him talking, but for you to set up a play, and you're directly dealing with those guys, you shouldn't be directly dealing with those guys. They should have to get to 2 to 3 people before it gets to Lil Durk. And if it's true that the play was, they got the money directly from you and this was attached to you, this wasn't a smart play. And, unfortunately his dad was in the streets. And the thing about it is, y'all don't even understand how I see this. Like, if you in the streets and your daddy locked up, he should be telling you not to go down that route. But a lot of times this is a rites of passage. I was a street nigga, you was a street nigga. Look at Pooh Shiesty and his dad. People that really cared about and wanted the best for their kids, they don't put them down that path. Even you see in boxing, you hear people say, I would want my son to box or my daughter to box. Nah, I don't want them to go through that. So why would you want to put your kids through street shit? That's what I just never understood. You know what I'm saying? If you had to do what you had to do to in the streets, you know what I'm saying? And you went through and you didn't have, you ain't gracefully living, or you ain't, you don't want your son to go through that. You don't want your daughter to go through that. But check out the Real 101 playlist, music entertainment playlist. And my favorite thing is, like, a lot of people they had these sayings like the streets are a myth. If the streets were a myth, Lil Durk probably gonna be looking at life for the upper room chair. If the streets were a myth, he wouldn't be looking at life. The streets are not a myth. The streets are real. People die in the streets every day. People lose their life in the streets every day. People get sentenced for stuff they did. The streets is not a myth. Nothing about the streets is a myth, other than the fake rules that you supposed to abide by. Other than really that, guess what? You can get rich out the streets, but is the success rate really that high? No. And, a guy that made it out, and Wallow told him, like, let that shit go. You know what I'm saying? Gilly and Wallow told him, let it go. But guess what? He probably wanted to let it go, but if he let it slide, the reputation that you built up in Chicago and with these fans being this street dude, you had to live up to it. If you didn't live up to it, your rap career was gone. But I'd rather not, I'd rather not have that rap career, have my freedom, than, not have my freedom and then have this rap career where people forgot about you. And the very same people that, when you start talking about, upper room for hire activity, with all that money he had, why are you paying, guys that's not professional? At that point, the money that you got, you might as well pay a professional guy, because they live by some type of creed, some type of code. Because in their profession, if they snitch or roll over in their profession, they exiled. They not gonna do that. But why are we being cheap? And I ain't saying he should do this regardless, but why are we being cheap with our life? That's the number one thing. Why are we being cheap with our lives? Why don't you go get a real professional? Allegedly Yellow Beezy paid some dude, but at least he didn't roll over. I heard he didn't roll over. But all this because you couldn't let the streets go. All this because you couldn't let the streets go. You had to live up to a persona that you built, or you couldn't go back home to Chicago. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to Chief Keef for getting out of that shit. Whoever was in that guy's ear, shout out to him for getting out of that shit. You supposed to be loyal to a city that engulfs y'all, that eat y'all alive, that send y'all to the upper room. I seen one of the dudes' mama, FBD Duck. She was hanging with his known op. I think the Rainbow dude that he was beefing with his son. I'm beefing with her son. It's like, damn. It's like, man, the streets don't love nobody, bro. That is not a myth. They don't love nobody, man. And now Durk got two dudes that's willing to roll over on him. You got to understand, what did they get promised? Probably so they won't get the death penalty. Maybe they get some special privileges. Maybe they get to go to a certain prison or something like this where they have some special privileges. But really, the real rules is whoever can get to the police first and roll over and snitch first. That's the real rule. Whoever can roll over first, whoever can tattletale first, get the best deal. You just like TK, a real ninja. When everybody else rolled over, you just a real ninja that's locked up. What good is that doing you? But in a way, Durk found a way out rapping. Been plenty of rappers that came out on one tip and then they changed their persona rapping wise. Let them say, oh, you fake, you a fraud, you a hoe. You grew. You a grown at, you grew. You got children. You got a family to feed. You got a career. You ain't got to do that street shit no more. It's called growth. The person that you are at 16 ain't the same person you're going to be at 21, 31. It's called growth, but the hood make you think because you elevate and you get more information and you change your life and you get out there and spread your wings and experience a different lifestyle, travel all over the world, that you supposed to be keeping it real as being the same guy. One of the biggest sins or one of the biggest wrongs is having the information and knowing right from wrong and having the information and not using it. God gave him a taste of what living righteous is making legit living, but he couldn't let it go. He had to keep a standard to his peers. And it's hard for somebody to slide on your mans. But his mans was a known, he was a known upper roomer. He was a known killer. But if you don't do nothing, where this lifestyle you live at, and if you do something, he was real, and now everybody on to the next dude. On to the next guy. So they got two dudes that's rolling over on them. They probably got them in protective custody. And that's just the two we know about. If your son going down that route, as a man, a route that you ran down, number one thing is, hey, bro, don't do that. You don't want your son growing nowhere near that. If your son grew up as a square or a nerd, but he a productive man, ain't nothing wrong with that, bro. Get an education, get a trade, he's smart. And in the black community, you know what I'm saying, if you want to call it a community, you know, you gotta be street, you gotta be hood. And they laugh at you. They laugh at you for being productive. But then they call you stupid when you go through some shit like this. Ass backwards, man. But hey, thumbs up the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel. Find me on X, Facebook, Kick, Twitch, Instagram, the whole nine. Appreciate the love and support. Peace. Check out the Real 101 playlist. Join the Patreon.